On ABBA's first holiday together, more precisely on their way in the plane, Björn proposed to Agnetha and they got engaged. In the summer that year, the wedding was an event. Two artists famous in their home country were married in a small village in the south of Sweden. 1 year later, Agnetha was pregnant with her first child, Linda. They were living in the suburbs of Vallentuna, and their friends Benny and Frida were so inspired by that cozy home and neighborhood that they moved along with them and to live close to Agnetha and Björn. It was a time when the four friends and artists were probably as close as they would ever get. There was so much hope, love and romance, a friendship between four young people at its strongest, with a prospect of, perhaps, expanding that personal bond to an artistic level. As we know now, this is exactly what ABBA turned out to be, capturing their feelings and experiences into music. Their first album, Ring Ring, has much importance for that foundation. Today we continue our exploration of the album through a time which will never come again.
We had a lot in common, a lot to speak about, and that's how it started actually. And we thought it sounded very good, the four of us singing together.
Hey. So, ABBA's first album was released at the end of March 1973. By January, they only had 6 songs ready, which would make it onto the finished album. In our last episode, we explored these songs in detail. In today's video, we will go through the remaining recording sessions for Ring Ring and also take a look at the album as a whole, its legacy and significance in ABBA's long-term career. They continued their recording sessions in January 1973 with one of the most important songs from the album. It would become the opening track, the title of the album, and their song for the Eurovision Song Contest pre-selection in Sweden, which happened just 1 month later. Almost the entire month of January was devoted to this song. Over the course of 2.5 weeks, ABBA created the Swedish and English versions of Ring Ring. The song was written just 1 week before the deadline of submitting songs for the contest, and it was written in just 1 or 2 days over 1 weekend in the famous songwriting cabin of ABBA on the island of Vixö. Their manager Stig Andersson came up with a catchy title. Neil Sedaka and Phil Cody made an important contribution and credit by writing the English lyrics, and Michael Bitretto created the wall of sound production inspired by Phil Spector. Like on their previous session in November for the equally impressive songs He Is Your Brother and Nina Pretty Ballerina, 3 important key members of ABBA's backing band were also responsible for the powerful backing track on Ring Ring, which was tight and captivating and playful at the same time. To top it all off, Agnetha and Frida were back with full force on lead vocals. In a standalone video on this channel, we are taking a more detailed look at the creation and all the layers of Ring Ring. In Sweden, the song was actually put twice onto the album. It kicks off with the Swedish version of the song and reprises with the English version on track 10. For the international release, the album opens with the English version, and track 10 has the B-side of that single, She's My Kind of Girl. I always liked this track, especially for that very catchy chorus. But this song is a solo recording from Björn and Benny and is by far the oldest song on Ring Ring. It was recorded more than 3 years earlier, in November 1969, and actually became their very first single in Sweden as a duo in March 1970. The song didn't chart at all, and more infamously, it became the soundtrack of that softcore film, The Seduction of Inga. So why would this song be resurrected now as a B-side and as part of ABBA's first album? First of all, for the B-sides on these first ABBA singles, they seem to have a tendency to choose Björn and Benny recordings from the past. But in 1972, She's My Kind of Girl actually became an unexpected big success in Japan. This must have been another motivation for Björn and Benny to keep aiming at the international market. So in a way, it does make sense to put this song on the international version of the Ring Ring album. Somehow, it is another meaningful part of the whole foundation. And in any way, now they only needed 4 more songs for an album of 12 tracks. At the end of January, they were back in the studio to record another brand new song, Me and Bobby's Brother. This song became one of the rare occasions when the lyrics were written by Benny. He would only do this 2 more times for the 2 closing songs on ABBA's next album, Gonna Sing You My Love Song and Susie Hang Around. The last one shares the lyrical themes of me and Bobby's brother, memories of childhood years. And as far as I'm aware, this was also the very first time that Frida has solo lead vocals on an official studio recording with English lyrics. She did perform jazz standards in English before, but finally this is her turn on record, and I think her voice is vibrant and warm and gives this simple tale so much life. Now, some of you were wondering if ABBA was perhaps inspired by the name of my very own YouTube channel. And I can tell you, I don't know. I don't know.
Nein, das ist ein Rumor. Ein Gerücht und das ist ganz unwahr.
But I must say, this is one of my favorite songs from the album. It has always been a favorite from the beginning. It takes me back to my own childhood days, carefree feelings of a spring or summer's day. And again, Frida's vocal performance is certainly a great reason for that and makes it all so vivid. It is her only solo lead vocal on the Ring Ring album. But on this day of recording sessions, 2 more songs were recorded with Frida on lead vocals, but those were never released. One is called Love is Always Young, which was probably the English version of Frida's song Barn and Silver, which was the closing track on her debut album 2 years earlier, and one of my top favorites. The song already appeared in The Seduction of Inga as well, as an early instrumental version, and it was composed by Peter Himmelstrand. The second song was called Feel, and again was not written by Björn and Benny either. And these 2 songs were not intended for the Ring Ring album. They were demo recordings for a festival in South America, on which one song was to be sung by Frida and the other one by Lena Andersson. Nothing came out of it, but I still think it is fascinating enough to mention these recordings here, since they were recorded on the same day as me and Bobby's brother, which gives us an idea of Frida's vocals on that day. And we know how good their demo recordings usually sound. So, if I was asked, and if they were open for it, I think these 2 songs would be a wonderful choice as bonus tracks for an archival release with unreleased material. They could also add the only other outtake from Ring Ring, Contemplation, which we talked about last time, as well as one of the early takes of He Is Your Brother. There is also an early take of Nina, Pretty Ballerina, an instrumental mix of Ring Ring, and, if they had a professional recording of it, the live version of Santa Rosa in Japan, which has a fascinating new arrangement adding Agnetha and Frida on vocals. It's always fascinating to see and hear more of how an album came to be. It always gives me a new appreciation and understanding of the process and the final version. So, for me, an archival release like that would be the best release by a long shot. Back in the day, they still needed 3 more songs for the album, but they wouldn't be back in the recording studio for a while. It was during this time when Agnetha was heavily pregnant. The bond between Agnetha and Frida during this period is described as having been their strongest. Frida, with her experience as a mother, was there for Agnetha to give advice and support during her pregnancy and with her newborn child. Linda was born on the 23rd of February 1973. Again, this personal bond and experience intertwined with their artistic road, because that month all their other focus was on the Swedish pre-selection for Eurovision, rehearsing, performing and failing. They reached number 3 and would not make it to the Eurovision Song Contest yet. But Ring Ring was a huge success with the audience and stormed the Swedish charts. That was even more reason, of course, that they really had to finish their album. It was released at the end of March, but they would not be in the recording studio until 2 weeks before. In just 2 days, 3 songs were recorded. The first one is another highlight for me. It would actually become their next single in the summer and gives us many of the early ABBA sounds established so far. Love Isn't Easy But It Sure Is Hard Enough has those shared lead vocals between male and female in variation, which they already used on their first 2 singles, People Need Love and He Is Your Brother. After all, this is an album by Björn and Benny, Agnetha and Frida. My friend Sam described it as rock at its finest, a bit of glam rock with a hint of country. Listening to the backing track alone reveals the rocking, melodic vibes of this track even better. The song is also a consistent continuation of most of the previous recordings for the album. Even though they only use 3 or 4 musicians on the backing tracks, they always approach a big wall of sound technique, in this case especially those punchy drums, the melodic bass and guitar playing, as well as marimba in parts of the chorus, I assume played by Benny on mellotron. The sharpness of Agnetha and Frida's voices is on an ultimate high. In my opinion, this is one of the very best vocal performances on the entire album, including the vocals from Björn and Benny. The song also gives us those classic harmony replies in the chorus, "Sweet, sweet, our love is bittersweet," and another trademark of future ABBA, feelings of ambivalence and conflict, in his simple lyric here, but with more complexity later on. Björn's lyrics are also one entity with the music, the punchy drums following the words, "But a few things can be tough." As expressive and powerful as this song was in sound, on the final 2 recordings for Ring Ring, they would balance it out with a very minimalistic approach. Disillusion was written by Agnetha Fältskog. Since 1972, she was writing songs for her next solo album, which would only be ready in 1975. Disillusion was one of the songs, and Björn wrote the English lyrics for ABBA's version of that song. It is the first time on record that Agnetha has solo lead vocals on a song in English, and it is her solo lead performance on the Ring Ring album. The song is a heartfelt singer-songwriter ballad with a stunning vocal performance, capturing Agnetha at that moment in time as a woman and wife and mother of a newborn child. The love and hope, you're all the reason for my life, you're all I had, you're all I want. In contrast with the bitter thought of loss. How can I forget you when my world is breaking down? Disillusion is all you left for me. For me, the atmosphere on this recording captures the feelings of solitude in the story. This minimalistic approach brings forth the beauty of the melody, and the simple use of Agnetha's voice is compared to the style of Carole King. Apparently, Björn and Benny tried to motivate Agnetha on and off to write more songs for ABBA. In 2013, Agnetha said this.
There was a time when I felt, how can I compose with these guys? So I felt I have to take a step back. But they have always wanted me to compose. But I felt that they are not good enough, you know.
In 1979, she wrote I'm Still Alive, which was only performed live in concert during ABBA's final tour and re-recorded 2 years later by another artist with Swedish lyrics, produced by Agnetha. She never contributed another song for ABBA before or since. The final song recorded for Ring Ring was I Saw It in the Mirror. To be honest, I never liked this song. I love this song, and I've always loved it from the beginning. I was surprised when I found out that apparently I seem to be one of the few people who really appreciates this track. And for me, this song is all about mood. A mood piece again. Solitary vibes, easygoing and laid back, with hints of rhythm and blues. This song is the second oldest song on the album. Again, it dates back 3 years to early 1970, when Björn and Benny wrote this song for Swedish blues singer Billy Gison. It's an entirely different backing track and arrangement, and I definitely prefer ABBA's version by far. The production and backing track are very minimalistic, but the playing is so precise. Mike Watson's bass, Benny's electric piano, the punchy drums, and the fine cymbals when they sing the lines, I never thought I could cry for you. I love the vocal arrangement they do. Again, it's low-key, but so effective, especially with the female choir of Agnetha and Frida flying in and out. And again, I just love the somber mood, lines like, honey, I will miss you till the day I die, 'cause something sure is wrong when this boy cries. But indeed, together with Disillusion, it is a contrast to the rest of the album, which overall has more of an easygoing pop style and generally innocent lyrics and themes. They now had 12 songs which were put together into one entity as cohesive as possible. So let's take a look at the album as a whole, and I must say I really enjoy the flow, especially throughout the first 8 tracks on the album. And there is a nostalgic vibe to the album as a whole. The overall theme is love, a bit of heartache, memories to the old times, and that longing for compassion amongst people. Incidentally, on those tracks, Longing for Compassion, they give us those shared vocals, the classic trading of lines between male and female. Those tracks also give us that full sound approaching Spector's wall of sound technique, which would keep getting more refined and complex in ABBA's subsequent albums. And it's certainly there in the opening track and title song of the album. What I notice is A and B side open with the two songs that have the most extensive wall of sound. That blasting sound is beautifully compensated with tracks featuring a more laid-back acoustic folk style. But I can feel even more balance in between tracks and how they sequenced both sides of the album. It's interesting that side A starts and ends with two of the most energetic songs. Both tracks have that incredible joint vocal performance from Agnetha and Frida. The solo lead performance of Agnetha is put amongst the first tracks on side A, Frida's solo is the second track on side B. You might also remember our comparison between the lyrics of Nina Pretty Ballerina and I Am Just a Girl. Well, side A ends with that simple girl Nina, and side B also has that simple girl towards the end. And finally, a closer look at these four songs towards the end shows how it brings together male and female again in a curious way. Two songs in a row end with brother, the following two songs with girl. I'm not saying that these are all conscious decisions, but it is a nice flow anyway, and we know how meticulous they were in sequencing their albums, even that early on. And even musically, I feel some links between songs. 3 tracks on the album have no fade-out, but a cold ending, and there is a nice flow to each of their subsequent tracks. Disillusion ends on an F, People Need Love starts one tone lower, on a banging G. The final note on I Saw It in the Mirror lingers in echo, and the following track fades in with echoing sounds of a locomotive introducing Nina Pretty Ballerina. And the cold ending of I Am Just a Girl is followed by another banging intro to Rock and Roll Band. When we put these two together immediately, it's a seamless connection. The album's artwork is described as being typical of its time. The photo was taken already in the autumn of 1972, around the time when they announced an album of all 4 together. It was taken by one of ABBA's exclusive photographers from the 1970s, Bengt H. Malmqvist. A slightly alternate take was already used for their second single, He Is Your Brother. For the album, Swedish designer Peter Viking was chosen to work his magic and create a simple artwork. He was known for working efficiently, on time, and said that there was never any time for real creation. He thought it wasn't the best picture, so to put some life into it, he used it 3 times. And that's the creation of a simple but dynamic artwork. I always felt it had an intriguing vibe to it, and when I see it, I hear in my mind the opening sound of ABBA's very first recording, People Need Love. Here they are, with a bang. Suddenly, they are one entity. This album is an important capsule capturing forever a time that would never come again. The innocent, carefree search for a sound and unit, a time on which they would build their foundation in the following years and decades. When their first 10 years ended in 1982, they had 2 standalone singles again, like in 1972, but this time they wouldn't find a place on an album. And even 3 decades later, when they found their ways back together again, their first recordings were initially not intended for a whole album. Once again, it was a gradual journey. As my friend Sam noticed, like Ring Ring, the creation of Voyage took a long time, certainly for different reasons as well. Even on Voyage, some of the songs were initially intended for other projects from the past. An old album from ABBA, a musical from Björn and Benny, and even film music once again. No softcore this time. Voyage and ABBA's preceding albums have more and more depth than the ones before, more experience, exactly what I said in the beginning. They captured their life and feelings into music. So in turn, that makes Ring Ring very special. As all of us realize more and more, life is eventually about loss. It comes sooner or later. The innocent, fun times are remarkably fleeting, and they are captured so wonderful in this, their very first album, ABBA's debut. As they sing, it's the happiest sound of them all. Those were my happiest days.